Welcome back to Guru Talk. I'm Dave Palumbo, and today's guest is the author of 2 awesome books on testosterone replacement. Actually, he calls it testosterone optimization therapy. I love that word, and we're going to get more information on exactly what he's all about. Let's get him here. Jay Campbell, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dave, man, I appreciate the opportunity, man. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. I have, something that's kind of dear to my heart is the term testosterone optimization. I love that term because I think a lot of people don't really understand what it's all about in terms of it's not just raising testosterone, it's optimizing the levels in the body. First of all, how did you get into testosterone? Because I know you're not a doctor, you don't really have a background in that, you kind of come from the corporate world. Give us a little background how you got into the whole hormone replacement field.
Yeah, sure. Again, it's an honor to be here, brother. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm very, very excited to be here to talk to obviously your listeners. And you have a very big influence in the bodybuilding space. I'm very familiar with your background, so it's awesome. Again, the question about how I got into this is I was sharing with you off the air is my story. For people who know me, I got kicked in the testicles playing basketball when I was 29 years old.
Who would have thought getting kicked in the balls would get you would make you an expert in testosterone, right?
Exactly, right? Like you never know how you're going to get there. There's no coincidences in life. But exactly. I went to a PPO doctor, and I was very blessed because this was 1999, and he said, "Look, you're in good shape, otherwise healthy. There's no reason that you should have these issues. I'm going to refer you to an endocrinologist, let him run some tests." He ran my blood. And it turned out that the guy was a world-famous, Harvard-educated endocrinologist out here in Orange County named Dr. Raymond Scruggs. I came back with I was type 1 classic hypogonadal. I was like 224 nanograms per deciliter total testosterone. He's like, dude, all you need is like a little bit of testosterone and you'll be good to go. So I was kind of, my background in college, I had a molecular bio minor, so I knew about that kind of stuff. But I still went home at the time was my first wife. And I was like, "Are you okay with us doing that?" And she's like, "Well, if you believe in it and you've read it and researched it, I trust you." I said, "Yeah, do it." So anyway, he put me on like 175 milligrams a week of Cypionate, and I felt amazing. Within 6 weeks. I mean, I had started struggling with like low back issues and stuff, but that was more from just playing basketball on hard surfaces and stuff. Plus, I'm getting older, and the testosterone totally revitalized me. Like I was like, "Wow, I feel like I'm 18 again. I can do whatever." So when the doc, got me back to feeling healthy and stuff, he said, "Hey, do you want to stop now? I can just withdraw you and stuff like that." He's a very knowledgeable guy. And I was like, "No, I want to stay like this."
Jay, do you think that you were low your whole life, or do you think that the shot to the testicles actually did something? Because I have a feeling you probably were low.
It's a good question. I mean, I was always a very competitive athlete. And I had very high IGF-1 levels. I've been on podcasts. I've had my 23andMe genes analyzed with Dr. Anthony J. And I have a lot of Neanderthal DNA. So it's possible that you're right. There's really no way to know. I mean, it never affected me, obviously sexually or energetically or any of that stuff. But it's possible. It's a good question. There's no way to know, right? Because I never had blood work done.
Because I know a lot of guys that were bodybuilders that had kind of like that pudgy look when they're a kid, and all of a sudden they go on a cycle, and all of a sudden their whole body transforms, wakes up, so to speak, and then they always have that in their mindset. They're going to go back to that fat little kid they were. But the truth was they probably were low testosterone their whole life. They weren't athletes in school. They were always like a little, fat kid, so to speak, and it changed their life,
It's totally possible because my genetics on my mom's side is soft endomorphic. My brothers were soft, those kids you're talking about. Yeah. I never really was, but then again, it's because I was also very energetic. I was always running. I was always doing something, just nonstop type A. But you're right. It's a very good question. And, no one's ever asked me that. It's possible. It's definitely very, very possible. But yeah, so it was totally transformative for me. And as I told you off the show, I just became a total bookworm nerd about it. Started researching it, started reading books from, various authors. And, again, back in 1999, as outside of Dan Duchesne's book and stuff in the gray market world, there was nothing. Nelson Virgil and Michael Moody wrote a book, Built to Survive.
Bill Phillips, anabolic reference
Bill
guy.
Phillips wrote some books. And then, again, our friend Bill Llewellyn was starting to write stuff back at the very beginning of that. But yeah, there wasn't much. So it was really hard. I mean, I tell people I read stuff on PubMed and Medline that was in Bulgarian translated. And back then we didn't have Google Scholar, right? So you couldn't translate stuff.
You had to find a Bulgarian person to do it for you.
Yes. So, I mean, I kept going. I stayed on it. Obviously, I've never been off. It's 19 years now. But I became so studious in it that people in my circle, in my white collar world, you said it perfect, in the corporate world, were always like asking me, how'd you look so good? Because I was always in amazing shape. And I would tell them, I was always very authentic with them and stuff like that. And so eventually, 10 years later, some people started asking me to write a book. And I was like, I don't think so. I want to keep my white collar world separate from this. Because again, Dave, as you know, this is back in 2009, 2010.
Stigma, yeah.
It still was not as accepted as we are where we're at now. Right? I mean, it was in the closet. There was, of course, Cenogenics was out there and Dr. Life, and that stuff was going on in the clinical space. But it wasn't, again, as accepted as it is now. So finally, about 2 or 3 years later, I had a white paper of the first book, the TRT manual, drafted. I sent it to Rick Collins. I sent it to Nelson Virgil. I sent it to Bill Llewellyn. I think I sent it to somebody else. I don't remember. And, Rick Collins called me and told me, he's like, look, man, he's like, your book's great, has the makings of a great book, but truthfully, nobody can protect you as a licensed medical professional writing a book on this if somebody gets a bug up their ass and says they want to look at you and stuff. And I didn't have anything to hide. Sure. But he was just like, look, he told me the truth. Rick's a very authentic guy too. He said, look, man, it's $250,000 that you're going to have to pay me if somebody wants to go after you to keep you out of the pen. So I was like, oh, I'm out. Yeah. But thankfully, 4 months later, as I told you, Nelson Virgil emailed me and he said, Jay, I read your book. I don't know who you are, but we need to talk. And then he told me, like, you don't need to be worried. Rick's just doing his job as an attorney. You need to put this book in the hands of men. So fast forward about a year, I put the book out in the end of 2015. The definitive TRT manual had amazing success on Amazon. And then over the last 3 years, actually almost 4 now, up to where we are now, I've just been blessed to be able to meet people in the clinical space, people like you, and just, push the mission out there, as like you said, about testosterone optimization therapy and how transformative it is for people. If used correctly and obviously in the right therapeutic dosage.
Jay, how do you sit down and write a book? Because I still have yet to accomplish that. I have a couple manuals I put together, but how do you sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a book on testosterone? Obviously you have to put down an outline first, but what was your in your mind, like what was the angle you were going to approach it from?
It's a really good question. I was blessed to have mentors and people that were actually also writing books at the same time. And then because of my presence on the internet, I did a lot of podcasts from 2011 to 2013 with Mike Cernovich. And Mike Cernovich now is like, I don't know what Mike Cernovich is now. He's still a close friend, but he's like a big, alternate right media personality. But, I kind of knew from the people we met in the podcasting space, like on how to create an outline of a book, how to put everything in a Google document outline, and then just write and, add research and pub and citation and all that stuff. So it was a gradual learning experience. And then I actually met a guy by the name of Rob Archangel. That's his real last name. And he had a small independent publishing company. He's Dutch, but he had a small independent publishing company in South Florida, or not South Florida, but he's I guess South Florida. He's like Tampa, a little bit north.
Right.
And he told me how to completely architect everything, right? Like, he's like, do this, don't do that. If you got the research, if you got the information, it's going to be simple once you do that. And so then that really allowed me to free flow my thoughts. But Dave, it's a really good question because the first book is really difficult to put together when you don't understand how to put a book together. It's not easy. Yeah. And then you're questioning yourself. You're like, it's not done yet. I don't like my conclusion. I don't like this. And honestly, dude, I killed myself over that year that Nelson helped me because the book was pretty much done in the early part of 2015 and I didn't publish it until November.
Wow.
So there was a lot of second guessing, a lot of questioning, a lot of editing. And then of course, being a non-licensed medical person, I did have doctors looking at it, right? Because I didn't want to put anything out there that would be like in the clinical space, like a big no-no. So some of those guys' egos and, their mindsets got involved into it too. So eventually I had to be like, guys, I love you guys. Thank you so much for helping. It's going to the masses.
I love you, but believe me alone. I'm not interested anymore. All right,
Yes,
so what did you learn in this whole creative process of putting this book together that other people, my audience, maybe me, might not know about testosterone optimization? What are the basic tenets that you kind of lay out in this book?
So that book, probably nothing, because when I wrote that book, it was more of a summation of everything that we all know in the bro fitness bodybuilding space, and then what the doctors knew back in 2014, 2015. So fast forward to the newest book, which is the Bible, which came out last year and like almost this time last year, mid of February. That is like state of the science. And when I say state of the science, dude, it's 600 pages.
Wow.
It's got 700 research citations. Like every single study, Dave, that has ever been done in the research community globally, not just in the United States, but wherever there were English research studies or translated into English, that shows the benefits of utilizing therapeutic testosterone, they're in the book.
Wow. And how do you do that? That sounds like a very tedious job.
Dude, my brain melted after that book. And quite honestly, because of the success of the first book and then also my fasting book, I did have people helping me. I always say, it's not just me, man, stepping on the shoulders of giants. I did have not a ghostwriter, but I have an editor in Canada who's amazing, right? Okay. So I'm very technical. I'm very science oriented. So he can take like my technical writing and, the best way to say it is dumb it down, to a 7th grade level so that the majority of people in the masses can read it. Because as you know, Dave, when you're in the esoteric realm of medicine, you're talking about terms and jargon that most people don't even understand. Right. So it's like you really have to write it for a level that, again, I call it lay, but like so everyone, essentially 7th grade education can understand what you're writing about. Right. So to do that with medical terms is not easy. So what I actually did is anywhere that's in the book that's clinical or dealing with endocrine system or, urology or molecular bio or any of that stuff, I have this doctor, with his like pocket protector and his doctor coat on, and it's called Nerd Alert, right? So it says right there, it says like, look, if you're not in the clinical community and you're just somebody, wanting to optimize your testosterone, you can skip over this because it's probably going to confuse you. Right. So people really like that whole book is broken out in that kind of seamless step-by-step fashion. So you can skip over the real hard stuff, the molecular bio and all that stuff if you don't really want to know it.
I'd probably only read the molecular bio. I'd probably skip the other stuff.
Exactly. and honestly, that's who I am. Like you and I are the same, right? But to answer your questions, to go really, really deep, like, and this is even stuff that's evolved since the book, but the understanding of like managing estrogen when men are utilizing therapeutic testosterone is like at a whole different level. Like I just did a podcast last week with Ben Pakulski, which I know you guys know each other. Yeah. And, Ben's an awesome dude. Jesus, he's an amazing guy. But like he and I went really deep because, he shared his experiences when, he was, top 4, top 5 guy for that short time that he was in that realm of how crazy he felt when he was on high dosages of Arimidex, of when he was blocking his estrogen. And so here's the thing, and without scaring your audience, and that's not the intention of this podcast, right? You do not want to block your estrogen in therapeutic testosterone.
Therapeutic, not pharmacological.
Yes. So, but let's go that route too, because it's very important that people understand what happens when you do block your estrogen. So the natural, and I know you know this, but I'm just going to say it anyway.
Yeah, no, say it like no one knows anything.
Okay, so the natural process of testosterone being converted, through aromatase into estradiol, which obviously becomes estrogen, is critically important in order to confer protection to biological systems. So when we block it, again, therapeutic, not pharmacologic, but I will get to pharmacologic. When we block it, we are not or stopping the protective effect to biological systems. So what happens when you stop the protective effect is a lot of really bad things, okay? And again, this is all, by the way, the best way to get this information, and we can share this link when this podcast runs, is in an article that I just wrote for Ben Greenfield's site on all the positive effects of estrogen as a pleiotropic hormone. So, but when you block it, what happens is the three biggest things that are really negative is that you screw with your brain chemistry, because it does all kinds of bad stuff to synaptic and dendritic pathways in the brain, okay? So that's why a lot of guys on AIs are full of anxiety, they're indecisive, they're brain fog. It's almost like the same symptoms they suffer from when they have a testosterone deficiency. Now they're amplified with the Arimidex, and sometimes it doesn't have to be Arimidex, it could be Aromazin, it could be any AI. And then the other things are bone mineral density and bone mineral absorption is critically blocked and stopped. Like that is so bad. Like that's probably the worst thing that like younger men on AIs, even again, very, very micro doses of AIs see when they do DEXA scans and they see how bad their bone mineral density is. And then the third one would be, just a loss of viscosity in the joints and stuff, because again, what it's doing is it's causing all kinds of issues to bone mineral density absorption and stuff. So you also have synovial fluid issues. So those are your three biggest things. But if you really go deeper, okay, the vascular network needs a high level of estradiol, again, to be protected. And all the studies show that the minimum protective effects are between 60 and 80. Again, when you're measuring estrogen in the body through a sensitive estradiol, LCMS pool. And very few men are ever at that level, because for some weird reason, we've seen doctors in the clinical community take the bodybuilding mindset into therapeutic and want to push estrogen too far down. So when you see doctors, and this is the biggest gotcha right now in the clinical community, that tell their patients that they need to be at X, and again, X below the normative values, and by the way, the normative values are a joke, 30 to 45, because we know minimum protection for vascular networks is 60 to 80, and they have the normative ranges as 30 to 45. So guys aren't even having a minimum protective effect of estrogen.
But Jay, when a person who's not on any hormone replacement, when they go for an estrogen, level, they're usually in the normal range. I'm assuming that's why they created a normal range, correct?
Well, so yes and no. So if you're an obese person, you're not going to be in the normal range. No. If you're an obese person, the most likely you have a lot of visceral fat. Yeah. And then you also obviously have insulin resistance. Right. And those two things cause, David, as you know, the majority of disease, right? Especially as people age, everything, heart disease, diabetes. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But if you have normative ranges, which, to answer your question, then yes, the answer to your question is absolutely true. The average guy not on hormone optimization or replacement is probably somewhere between 20 and 30, right? So those normative ranges, of course, are perfect for the average, aging male population. But you're right, not for guys on therapeutic testosterone. And that's where the confusion goes, because, again, give a guy therapeutic testosterone, don't block his estrogen. It's only natural that his estrogen is going to increase due to the excess exogenous testosterone, which then becomes, through aromatization, estrogen, which you need, again, to confer minimum protection. So the confusion has become that doctors giving guys therapeutic testosterone are trying to suppress estrogen to even lower levels than the normative ranges, because they have this absurd belief that they must block or inhibit estrogen from doing what it does naturally when they give them therapeutic testosterone. So it's a big misnomer. Right, but you're saying that the normal range, not to interrupt, sorry, but you're saying that the normal ranges are not adequate for some reason. They're not adequate for men on therapeutic testosterone. They should actually not even be observed. In fact, it's a great question, because the top doctors right now in the clinical space, and unfortunately there are not a lot of them, but they're out there, and they're teaching others now too. So thankfully it's becoming better known, but those numbers literally should not even be observed. They will tell a man on therapeutic testosterone that you should not even be evaluating top end, low end of total testosterone or estradiol, because really all you're trying to have is symptom resolution and how the person feels, right? So if done correctly at the very beginning, and again, let's just say take an average 45-year-old guy who's deficient, he needs testosterone, he should be started off on testosterone in isolation, and then after 6 to 8 weeks, see how he does, and then based on his symptomology, then address whether or not he needs to reduce his dosage, increase his frequency of his delivery system, possibly add SDHEA, possibly add pregnenolone based on, again, if he has a deficiency through measured blood work, through symptomology. But what happens, Dave, as you know, is that the majority of people out there prescribing testosterone today, clinics, are giving guys cookie cutter, very templatized versions of therapy, right? Which starts with an AI, starts with HCG, starts with testosterone, and then value added whatever else they have them on.
Right.
And so what happens, and this is very important, and this is a great questions you're asking, you never know as the clinician or as the patient what is doing what. You have no idea what chemical or medication is doing what in combination with the other. So it's like we always say now, it's like you have to see what testosterone in isolation is going to do to that person's, individual biochemistry, because we're all biochemically unique, right? We know that. Right. So it's like you can't give all these guys these cookie cutter versions of this, and this, and then send them away and expect everything to work. You got to understand what testosterone does in isolation. Now, there's one caveat where that doesn't apply, right? If a guy's in his 30s or 40s and he still wants children and he wants to maintain luteinizing hormone function so he can obviously maintain motile sperm, then you can actually put him on HCG or a very, very microdose of clomiphene to maintain that luteinizing hormone level enough so that he can maintain motile sperm and still, have children. But outside of that, there's really, in my opinion, and obviously there'll be doctors that will debate me and other doctors will support me, I don't see a need to have anything else until your body shows a need for the other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important definitely to do blood work without a doubt. But if you're taking let's say you're taking 100 milligrams a week of testosterone replacement.
Yes.
Yep. More than likely, you're going to still be you'll probably be in the high normal range of total testosterone, probably around 800 or something like that if you're lucky. I'm just giving you my own personal
I agree.
Type of situation.
You're right.
My estrogen was never that high. I'm not an aromatizer, but then again, I have very low fat in my body.
Right.
So I never took an aromatase inhibitor while I was on TRT. However, my DHT tends to genetically be a little higher, so I always took a DHT blocker. And I felt that worked ideal for me because that was what my blood work dictated.
And brother, that is exactly how this is supposed to be done. Mm-hmm. And that's a perfect example, right? You know that genetically you do this, but you don't do that. So there's no really way to know unless, and that this is a whole nother rabbit hole. You can get your DNA analyzed now, right? Like, if you have a gyno gene. Yeah. If you're, you have high IGF, if you have like the athletic traits to build, type 2 muscle fibers and, fast twitch and aerobic glycolytic and all that. But most people, are not going to do that. The average bro who has a deficiency is going to go to his clinic. And you know this because you're in Florida, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, they're going to go to their clinic and the clinic's going to be like, look, dude, you're at 180 or 220. We're going to put you on testosterone. But then that's where the problem becomes because instead of looking at that dude individually, and you can't blame the doctor, right? They got thousands of patients. So they just put them on the templatized version and then come back and see me. And then who knows what happens to them.
Yeah, I think some of these clinics, though, they do a pretty good job with following up with blood work and and they tighter, the dosages and they tighten because I work with Titan Medical Center in Tampa and they're pretty good like that. They start out with a templatized type of format, but then based on blood work, they up and lower certain things depending on what the person needs. Because it would be silly, like you said, if you're bottoming out estrogen, to give a person an aromatase inhibitor. Exactly. I make a natural product from Species Nutrition called Testalize. I call it Testosterone Optimizer. Ironically enough, I've been selling it for years, so it was before I even talked to you. But I always felt that controlling estrogen through rather than aromatization blockade, just through binding up extra estrogen and helping to eliminate it from the body, excess estrogen, using some of the, indole 3-carbonyls, diindole methane type compounds, and then naturally blunting DHT production a little bit. Because I always find most people, when they take testosterone replacement, they definitely do aromatize a little more, and they definitely convert more to DHT. And I think that's just the body's way of taking any extra testosterone and getting rid of it. The body just doesn't want a lot of testosterone in it. It has a certain limit that it likes to stay at, and I think that it levels itself off.
So I agree, but you said something that was brilliant, and you don't really realize that you said something that was brilliant. Dave, The reason for what you just said is why that is true is because the majority of men that go on therapeutic testosterone are not lean. Okay. And if you have visceral body fat right here in center trunk mass, right, the adiposity right there in the belly button and the navel and the suprailiac, that region, that causes a massive inflammatory response when testosterone comes into your body exogenously.
Why, Jay?
You what?
Why does that happen, Jay? Tell
us. So why that happens is because visceral fat is the most inflammatory material in the body, from an organ standpoint. And so you give a body exogenous dose of testosterone, even a low dose. And depending on how that person individually aromatizes, because that's genetic too, you're going to have that response or that experience that you exactly talked about. And so what happens, unfortunately, is that patient has that, inflammatory or inflamed response to the exogenous testosterone, and then they have what are perceived as high estrogen symptoms, which again, water retention, irritability, moodiness, a couple other things. And immediately the doc either reduces their testosterone dosage or increases their dosage of an AI. And that's exactly opposite of what they should be doing, because we already know what the AI is doing, again, to them biochemically, both short and long term, which you don't want. What they should be doing is, first off, telling the dude, hey, dude, if you're 17, 20, 22% body fat, you got to lose your body fat, dude. Because if you don't lose the body fat, you're going to continue to experience these symptoms. You're not going to have symptom resolution through the AI at all. Sure, you'll feel better because you won't have the water retention, but it's not good for you long term. So the real solution is threefold. You reduce body fat, you reduce testosterone dosage, and, which is probably most important for most guys, is you increase the frequency of the delivery system. And Dave, you do that primarily because I already know you're shaking your head, you know the answer, but you want to mimic the body's endogenous production, right? Sure. So if the body is, pulsatively releasing testosterone and diurnally through a 24-hour cycle, if you're giving your body exogenous forms, and again, we'll get into delivery systems before this podcast is over, it should be almost daily or every other day. Now that's for injections. For cream, it can be twice a day, whatever. We'll get into the delivery systems. But if you do those three things, you don't need an AI.
Interesting.
And you will never need an AI. And you already talked about it earlier in the show. The leaner you are, you're not going to have an AI. I mean, Ben told me Ben and I were talking, he was like, I never had a need for an AI except when I was in the last 2 or 3 weeks before getting on stage, and I had a water retention problem in my glute ham tie-in, right? And no matter what I did, I could not, no matter how lean and striated I got, I could not get rid of that water unless I used the AI. And then of course he shared his experience, and without giving all the details, he's like, dude, I was insane. Right? Like, he's like, I was not functional, So, and that's what we talk about when we go deep into the understanding of what AIs do to the brain and synaptic pathways and the dendritic pathways. It causes a lot of issue. And that's why so many men, even on microdosage, Dave, of AIs are screwed up. Now, again, everybody's different.
Yeah, I think everyone responds differently. I agree.
Yeah, some guys can be on AIs and be fine.
And Jay, let's not face it, Ben was talking about the last 2 weeks before our competition.
Right.
He might have been insane anyway, you know what I mean?
Dude, he literally, though, was like very, very open about this. He was like, I knew, and again, he's a very evolved dude soul-wise, but like, he was like, I knew what was doing what in my body. And when shit like blew me up, I was like, I'm out. But I found that there was no other option for me if I didn't do that. And again, you and I talked about this, right? We haven't even said it. So when you're in the super physiological, pharmacologic, dose realm, and guys are using polypharmacy, and it doesn't matter, right? No judgment. All bets are off, right? I mean, when you're at that dosage and you've got that much, estrogen production and water retention and all that, sure, you're going to have to use it. Does it make it better for you? No. It still causes a lot of potential problems long term. And like one of the problems, and I'll just say it right now, and again, I don't want to institute fear, but there are researchers out there right now that know that these AIs in women, of course, where it's more studied than even men, because obviously they're breast cancer drugs, right? They create what are called microblisters in the vascular networks, okay? You have a microblister or microblisters or a lot of them throughout your vascular network, you're basically walking around as a potential heart attack. It's that simple. You're going to, at some point, most likely have some form of a myocardial infarction. Now, again, if you stay in shape.
What is a microblister? Just explain that. Is it like
it's a tear. It's like just a tiny tear in the vascular lining. So, and they can appear anywhere. Can
that result in aneurysm of blood vessels?
I think if you search microblister vascular network, you'll see that there's a lot of different things that can potentially happen. So, and they're not positive, obviously, but the reality is, and this is saved for the Dave Palumbo show. This is a live break, or they call it a live leak. There are many people in the clinical research world right now who are very, very fearful that the next wave in the therapeutic testosterone realm that's going to really cause harm to all of us living this lifestyle. And we know that this lifestyle is amazing, right? When you do everything right, it's insane. It's a difference between like dying and, falling apart as you age and being like robust and vigorous and just full of energy.
Right.
Is that guys are going to start dropping, dude. And unfortunately, the community is so, I'll say it, retarded that they will immediately, as you know, Dave, put the crosshairs and the scope right on therapeutic testosterone and not actually look at the real causative agent.
Right.
And the causative agent is going to be the AI. Okay.
So you really think they're that bad?
Again, for not everyone, but for many, yes. Okay. Yes. Again, and I can point you to the research. There is a doctor out there who's done an amazing job for the last 10 years, Dr. Neil Rougier. And he teaches he's not a practicing physician anymore. He just lectures, but his company, I tell anyone who's in the clinical space, if you want to learn about this, that's where you go. It's WorldLink Medical. And he does offer training. I've gone to his training. I'm going to his second level training in August, for women because he's the guy. I mean, he knows everything there is to know about this. But he has been saying this for 10 years. He's like, the AIs are very, very toxic chemicals. If you understood what they did actually in women's breast cancer research and patients, they would not be prescribing them willy-nilly to men inside the therapeutic community. And I also know this, Dave, I've been on this band of screaming from the heavens, from the bully pulpit about the dangers of AI for 8 months now. And I have had more than 1,000 men from around the world message me in some capacity, all telling me that they feel like I saved their life. They feel so much better that they stopped using the AI because, again, we know what they do, and what doesn't seem to transfer or to correlate yet is the clinical world recognizing this and, starting to, as you call it, titrate men off of them completely. Now, there are some obviously issues. If you're a guy who's been on an AI for 10 years, again, a microdose, 0.00025, whatever, and you come off because you're like, holy shit, I heard Jay Campbell, I heard Dr. Rougier, I know what's going on. You might have, for 60 to 90 days, some weird, uncontrollable side effects that we can't even interpolate where they come from. They will subside.
Okay.
Your body has become used to that medication.
Right. Do you think that these aromatase inhibitors might actually be inhibiting something else that we're not really aware of?
Oh yeah. That's
where I see the problem. I don't think they're just obviously blocking estrogen production. They might be doing something else, and that's really what the side effects are coming from.
Well, that's what it is, right? If you don't have estrogen to confer protection, even minimally, obviously you have that risk to biological systems. Right. So you have a systemic breakdown in what is supposed to be happening in natural evolutionary process as a person ages, definitely. But I would say that your answer, and by the way, very smart insight, is the brain. So what's going on in the brain when there's no estrogen is not good. And so you probably have a lot of different effects and cascades in the brain that are not right.
But Jay, do you think possibly, because some people take aromatase inhibitors and their testosterone are in normal range, yet you're still seeing these side effects. So is it possible that it's maybe not the low estrogen that's causing the problem, but maybe the aromatase inhibitor itself is blocking something else that we're not aware of?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I believe it's in the brain. I believe that what it's doing in the brain is, somehow stopping the production of something, in the neuroendocrine, stuff, the I can't even think. The terminal patterning, Dr. Mark Gordon talks a lot about this. Mark Gordon, by the way, I know you know Mark Gordon, obviously. He's been on Joe Rogan's show like 4 times, and he's the guy when it comes to working with TBI and all the, the military guys that have been injured. And he swears that he's never had any patient in 32 years of clinical practice using AI. And he talks about what it does neuroendocrinely. And he's like, you cannot even afford ever to touch it. And you probably know this, maybe you don't. There's a lot of studies online about using an AI along with a SERM as a form of testosterone optimization therapy. Like they were doing this a lot in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, kids. They were giving it to kids who had low testosterone.
Yeah, dude, insane, right? Like I know surgeons that were really short people, and they're like, oh my God, I'm gonna give my kid an AI to increase his growth plate curve, right? Because of the vesial plate closing and stuff. It supposedly extends it. Dude, the bottom line is that there's no real reason when people really look at the research of how important it is for testosterone from a therapeutic level to aromatize into estradiol/estrogen, you would never block it because all those biological processes that are critical to the development of life and obviously the natural aging and optimal aging. So you wouldn't do it, but for some reason it just pushed over. And a lot of reasons too, I think, Dave, and this is my personal opinion, I think that a lot of doctors today are afraid of the lawsuits. So they have the CYA mentality, right? So a guy gets sensitive nipples 2 or 3 weeks into testosterone because he's fat. And again, that's the majority of people, right? We know that 65% of people in America are fat. So bottom line is the doctor, instead of saying, okay, come in, let's look at this and let's go through it, he just does the gunshot approach, which is like, here, I'll write you a script for an AI. And then the guy takes the AI and of course the nipples resolve, or the pain, the sensitivity to the pain resolves. But again, that high dose AI now, instead of resolving that, it's also causing all those other downstream effects.
It's interesting you say that because I get a lot of bodybuilders that contact me and they're like, the nipple sensitivity they'll drive me crazy with them. I'm like, look, we did blood work on you. Your estrogen is not that high. Just leave it alone. As long as you don't have any developing, breast tissue, who cares if it's a little sensitive?
Dude, I'm so glad you say that because here's what I found out. And this is a whole chapter in my book, by the way. Almost every doctor does not know this. If you took a random sampling of 100 of the best doctors in the world and you asked them this question, 98 would get them wrong. I didn't know this, but you do not stop gynecomastia with AIs. No medication will stop gynecomastia because gynecomastia is genetic.
I agree 100%.
If you have the gene, and I had to find this out myself. I mean, I had surgery in 2000. Yeah, I had surgery in 2016. And by the way, I never had an issue after 15 years, and then boom, it comes, right? So you learn if you have the gene, it can come at any time.
Jay, I took one shot, my first shot of testosterone, Sustanon I took when I was like 24 or 23.
And boom.
The next day I had lumps under there and sensitivity, and a week later I had it taken out. So I obviously had a genetic predisposition to it. There's no way after one shot that I should have had a problem. And I tell people, you could take 1,000 Arimidex a day. You will not reverse gynecomastia. You got to go to my good friend, Dr. Blau in White Plains. He's the #1 guy in the world. And just get it taken out and accept that.
Exactly.
And you'll never worry about the other side effects again because there really are no other side effects. That's the worst side effect.
I'm so glad.
Jay, it traumatizes people so much that the gynecomastia that they'll take 16 Arimidex a day. I know guru coaches out there that give their guys 4 milligrams of Arimidex and 10 milligrams of letrozole and 25 milligrams of Aromasin every day just to cover their bases. Can you believe it?
Those guys are probably literally walking corpses. Their brains are probably spinning in directions.
Some of these guys are dead already, Jay. I hate to say it. I don't want to name names, but some of them are dead. What do you recommend for people who are doing, heavy testosterone and anabolic steroid cycles?
So it's a great question. You absolutely need to do a scan. You need to do a coronary artery scan. You should do the 3-dimensional, whatever that thing's called. The name escapes me right now. But if you've been on, if you've been on, and they even have another one now. There's even another virtual one.
The calcium score. Jay, I want to brag for a minute here. I had a calcium score done the other day. I have a 0. They said we've never seen a 0 in a 50-year-old man.
That's awesome, bro. I'm 48. So you graduated high school in 87?
86, yeah.
Okay, so I'm 89.
Yeah.
We're close, man.
Yeah.
But I have a tiny, like a microscopic amount of plaque, and but yeah, that's awesome, dude. Like the reality is what you said, Dave, and I'm so glad you said it. It's all about keeping your body not inflamed.
Right.
And you're not going to be inflamed if you're lean. If you are lean and you stay lean, not bodybuilding, get lean for a show and be a fat motherfucker, right. In July, in January, that is the problem, is that, guys who are fat are constantly inflamed. So anything that you eat or you take or you experiment with, you're going to have a reaction, inflammatory response to the visceral fat on your body. And dude, you know this, men that have bellies, they're the heart attacks.
Yeah.
Those are the guys that are walking around with the highest risk, because that area creates the biggest inflammatory response.
Why do bodybuilders have a lot of visceral fat? Or so they say. It's impossible to really know. But why do we have these guys with big amounts of visceral fat on them?
My guess, and again, it's just a random theory, a wild-ass guess, is because they eat in such high amounts in quote-unquote the off-season, that the body, and then of course polypharmacy and all that stuff, you got to take that into fact. The body just, so a lot of them have fatty livers, right? So they're not emulsifying, and they're not like essentially through deamination of the liver and all that stuff, they're not really getting rid of whatever is bad and backing up free oxyradicals, all that stuff. And the body is very prone to store and create visceral fat when it can't, channel and process all of the stuff and nutrients and minerals and micronutrients and all that stuff. So that's what ends up happening. If you look at the average guy who has, a lot of visceral fat, and then you went and you did that test to see if they have non-alcoholic fatty liver, 99% will have it.
Oh, yeah.
So they're just not able, from a metabolic process standpoint, to deaminate and to detoxify. They just have basically a buildup of systemic toxins.
So you think it's systemic toxins because a lot of these guys have zero body fat subcutaneously,
Well, so another thing too, it's a great question. If they're using an AI, and this is in the literature, and I can send all this to you.
Yeah.
The AI blocks visceral fat loss. It literally stops it dead in its tracks.
What's the mechanism?
I don't understand the mechanism.
No.
I don't think anyone understands the mechanism. It's just very, very well known. It's again, I think it's a cytokine issue that you get to a certain level and then you're at 2 or 3 or guys have negative estrogen levels, bro. So when you're there, you have absolutely no ability to stop negative cytokine formation. And so my guess is that's essentially what's happening. And then you just have no visceral fat loss.
Right. Now, when I was competing, I always recommended, and even to my athletes, I always recommend doing the every other day injection protocol. I just felt that everyone's always like, yeah, but testosterone, it's long acting. You could just take 1 shot a week. I said, look, I don't know what's going on, but I just know from what I went through, when I took it every other day, I had much more even levels. I didn't break out as much. I felt mentally much more stable mood-wise, and I just feel it's more effective. I didn't know why I was saying it, but I empirically saw it.
So you and I are on like a connected soul level, because in the first book, that's literally what my methodology and my entire narrative was that you had to simulate the body's endogenous release of testosterone. And the best way that you can do that, obviously through injection therapy, is to do it as frequently as possible. And by the way, for 17 and a half years, technically almost 18, I used every other day. Okay, injections. And I've never gone higher than 175 milligrams a week. I've used other things as a guinea pig. I'm very open about that. I've tried pretty much everything. I've used growth hormone. I've used all the peptides. I have really good understanding of all that shit. You and I could do another podcast one day on all that nerdy shit. And I'm sure you got a million guys that know that stuff too. But bottom line is there's only 2 delivery systems that work in therapeutic. Okay. And that is what you just said, which is injections. And I do not recommend now anything less than daily or every other day. We used to say twice a week is fine because we're clipping the half-life. We understand the peak, of SIP or ananthate is like 36 to 40 hours. But here's the thing, Dave, is like with all these guys, fat, visceral body fat, and insulin resistance, which is so prevalent now, you're still going to have like that, in between time between the second injection where guys are going to start feeling off, or they have that inflammatory response as the half-life just goes boom, right? So if you go daily, or what you do, and again, the every other day is probably the best from a convenience standpoint for most people, because you got to be pretty fucking anal retentive to inject everything. I mean, it's true, right? Like some guys, I mean, it's true. I mean, there's
compliability, you know what I mean? So
exactly, dude. That's what we always say in the clinical community is like, what are you going to adhere to? The best delivery system is what you're going to adhere to, right? But I'm here to tell you as a dork and interpreter of the research that outside of every other day and daily, you're going to have, biological perturbations of your endocrine system. And for most guys who are fat, that's going to be negative. Okay. And you said it best, like acne. I've been doing a lot of research on acne recently, by the way, and I don't want to rabbit hole because I want to get back to cream because this is like a revelation. But I think acne, Dave, and I'll ask you what your thought is on this. I think acne now is 100% related to nutrition. And what I mean by that is that your insulin curve is what's going to cause the acne vulgaris eruption. And I think guys, especially guys like us, right, where we're pretty much lean year round, but then sometimes when we want to indulge, we're like, fuck, I'll eat whatever. I think that's what causes that, wave to be like, oh my God, my body just sends this massive insulin shock, boom, eruption.
When I was a kid and I started having acne issues, I went to the dermatologist and they told my mother and I, food has nothing to do with it. Eat whatever you want. Don't worry about it. Put this cream.
Of course they did.
Believe me, that was the biggest load of crap I've ever heard. I know for a fact that dairy and sugar intake definitely irritates skin, and especially in greasy Italians like me. People who release their toxins through their skin predominantly, greasy Italians, Greeks also fit that will get more acne because, and especially if you eat irritants foods that are irritants, because as they're coming out, they irritate the pores and the sebaceous glands, and you get the bacteria growing in there. Absolutely food, but also hormone related, and that's why women certain times of the month get those weird acne breakouts. And it's because hormones are varying. That's why I always am an advocate, especially of guys who take anabolic steroids, of using long-acting esters because at every other day basis, so you get more of an even curve and you don't get those breakouts. So it is definitely food related and it's definitely hormonal fluctuation related.
Yep, 100% agreement. You nailed it. It's so funny how the medical establishment really doesn't know jack shit. Really,
they just don't want to say anything about it. That's all.
I mean, at the end of the day, man, that's a whole other podcast. But food and I always say this: like at some point, and maybe you and I will be long gone. Maybe we'll be reincarnated in somebody else. But they'll straight up admit that all diseases etiology is metabolic, right? It's all from the shit that you either breathe or that you eat is what causes inflammation, which leads to degradation, which leads to disease. But just getting back to the delivery system. So I started 7.5 months ago, almost 8 months now. I stopped injections after close to 18 years, and I started using testosterone cream transcrotal. So yes, I wipe it on my nuts. But so here's the reality. So I was very resistant. I have a doctor, really smart guy, Dr. Keith Nichols. He's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He is licensed in the state of Florida. When you get overwhelmed, because guys are going to be like, fuck, dude, if I don't have to inject myself anymore, I want that. But so the bottom line is there's one study that's out there that talks about the absorption rate of cream. Again, and by the way, caveat, we're not talking gel. I've had guys like, dude, I put the gel on my nuts and my nuts burned off. I thought I was going to have to go to the emergency room.
Yeah.
It's only cream, Versa-base or HRT base, 200 milligrams per gram. Again, every compound pharmacy, Titan, they all make it.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, though, putting it here on your upper chest or any of that shit is garbage in comparison to right on the bottom of your scrotum. And again, there's one study. It's 8 times better absorption in that area due to the skin's emollient quality. So I notice this for myself now after doing it. When you get out of the shower, you shave your nuts. And again, guys are like, I don't want to shave my nuts, bro. Just shave your nuts once a week, dude. Okay? It's not that hard. And you don't even have to shave them all, just that one spot right under your pole. I feel like I should just hey, Dave, let's just do this. Let's just do a full break. But you just So you get there's two applicators. There's the Toppy Click. Have you seen the Toppy Click where you just click it and it comes out, boom, boom, boom. So that is a perfect dose. Or the other one, which is cheaper, is just a tube, and you have like a little thing you put on it and you push it and it shows you what your dosage is. For me, at my point now, dude, I just eyeball it, put it on my finger and just on. But again, fresh shaved sack, out of the shower, the absorption is so good that like within, I would say 25 to 40 seconds, you really don't even have any residue in your boxers.
Wow.
Right? So a lot of guys, though, will be like, oh, well, fuck, bro, you know, it might wipe off on my wife or my dog or my partner or whatever. Sure, there's the risk of, systemic transfer, but it's so minimal. And like, my doc, he says, hey, dude, if it gets off on your wife, it's a good thing, right? So, I mean, there's no real risk as long as you're not like, your wife's going down on you or whoever's going down on you, 5 minutes after application. Sure. But I mean, Dave, I will tell you this, bro.
You do it before bed, basically. Yeah.
I feel so much better. So here's the pharmacodynamics of the cream. 200 milligrams per gram, AM and PM dosage. Now, some guys who are really lean and balanced, which would be you guys like you and me, you might not even need a second dosage, right? Like I say, I will use a second dosage. If my wife and I go away on a weekend, we want to get frisky, we're at an exotic beach location, I want to have a higher libido. But normally I don't have to. And here's the thing, and we're getting into the chemistry. When you put it on your scrotum, you have a higher DHT spike, right? So the dihydrotestosterone, which is the primary androgen signal, which is way more anabolic than actual testosterone, you are going to get like that increased libido. Now, it's not going to make you a raging sex maniac or anything like that, because some guys are like, dude, I don't want to have test goggles, right? Yeah. And you're not going to have that, but you definitely have better energy. And I would say that I mean, this is no lie, comparatively to injections, there's no drop. Mm-hmm. Like you stay like this all day long. Right. Which after almost 18 years of injections, I always, even if I was doing it daily, and I barely ever did daily, I think I did daily maybe for a couple of months in my whole 18 years. And again, you get tired of it. I don't want to fucking inject myself every day. Right. But even on daily, I didn't feel disenergized and this like just even keel. And by the way, with cream, you're not going to have any side effects. You will not have any acne. You will definitely not have any necessary or need for an AI. Nothing. Zero. None. Really? Absolutely none. Because this is like basically your body producing it. Mm-hmm. It's as close to getting it produced by putting it right on your scrotum.
Because you're putting it on your scrotum, and we all know that a lot of times when you take a testosterone injection, your fertility goes down because now you're not producing the testosterone locally anymore. So it's not, the testosterone is not then in terms stimulating sperm production. Now, when you put testosterone locally in that area, will that increase sperm count?
No, you won't notice any of that. You definitely will notice. A harder. You will have firmer erections. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, like you'll notice more girth. You do have that nitric oxide stimulation effect, like you would be taking if you were taking a little bit of, Cialis or Levitra or anything like that. And we could talk about endothelial function on this podcast because we should. A lot of men should understand that, but. The only thing you definitely notice is thicker erections. And Dave, what I call it is I say, obviously I'm in a monogamous relationship for now. No, I'm just kidding. babe, just please let somebody in one time. We go to Vegas. She's like, nope, I don't share. You know how it is, right? But bottom line is, I love my wife. I'd say that jokingly. She's an amazing woman. But bottom line is you definitely have a better ability to like get ready right away. Like the cream versus the injection just makes you much more psychosexually connected is the best word. You're just there, right? Like you don't need any kind of visual stimulation. Like your wife goes at you, it's like, boom, you're hard. Now obviously, go ahead. Yeah, no. Just to stop you for 1 second, would this be something that maybe people might employ while they're even on a cycle? Because some guys on a cycle, I don't know. That was never my case. I always was very hypersexual when I was on a cycle. But some guys actually lose their sex drive. I don't know for what reason. Would taking a cream in conjunction with a cycle be something that might be done? Okay, hold on. Let me put my J. Campbell is not in the clinical community space right now. Let me put that hat on real quick. Okay. So for people in the bodybuilding realm, Using polypharmacy, absolutely, because again, the signal is to the DHT spike as the primary androgen will definitely increase sensitivity and increase that psychosexual function because you're definitely increasing DHT. So, but one thing back to your question, some guys when they use the cream, because of that DHT spike initially will have, if they go get their blood work done right away, they will have a higher PSA. Okay, it's nothing to be concerned about. Again, there's studies behind this. Whenever you use a transdermal delivery system for testosterone, you will see, even not put right there, which is again by far the best area for absorption, you will see sometimes what they call a transient PSA spike, but it will go away. And when I say go away, it usually is gone, after 90 days. Some guys it's gone after a week. For me, when I first started doing it, I didn't get my blood work done because I know I'm not stupid. I have an amazing doctor to go through it and to counsel me and coach me. But I felt like a little bit of, I would say maybe just being swollen a little bit, like my urine stream wasn't as powerful for maybe like 2 weeks, and I was talking to him about it and telling him, he's like, look, it's totally normal. You're just one of those guys that just gets that, a little bit of sensitivity from the DHT, but don't worry, it'll go away. And he was totally right. So no issue whatsoever. There's really no reason to run if you have that sensitivity and go look at your PSA. Because, dude, you know this. The PSA is not even a good arbiter anymore of risk to prostate cancer at all. If your wife sticks her finger up your ass, if you're a dude and you're gay and you have anal sex or any of that stuff, you can massively blast your PSA and create a false positive.
Right. So let me ask you another question. Getting back to the aromatase inhibitors, Clomid and Nolvadex, which are the selective estrogen receptor modulators, they block estrogen receptors essentially, versus the aromatase inhibitor that actually inhibits the production of testosterone into estrogen.
Right.
How do you feel about the Nolvadex and Clomid solution to estrogen rather than the Arimidex type?
I think they're all, I think you know this by now, I think they're all useless. I think, again, in the therapeutic realm, I think in the bodybuilding realm, if you want specific site effects, obviously tissue in the breast, if you're on a massive polypharmacy dose as a bodybuilder, you'll definitely get quote unquote resolution of symptoms. But we both know, right? If you're genetically predisposed, it's still going to come back. Right. You're still going to have to get it removed. So your answer is the best answer I've ever interviewed. I've had a lot of interviews, bro. I tell guys the same thing. And by the way, I saw on your website that surgeon. I never even knew that guy, but that's awesome. I definitely went to his site and I looked at his shit. He's brilliant. Yeah, he's great. The guy that I saw is on the West Coast is probably like him. His name is Dr. Joseph Cruz. Okay. He's done 3,400 gyno removal surgeries. He's done so many celebrities and but this guy's a dork, and I'm sure your guy is too. He knows all the research about gyno. Yeah. On his site, he has 30 models of men. And he has every picture of what gyno can appear and present like. Yeah. And so they have all of the, plastic surgery remodeling and, like your guy and this guy, don't fuck around, right? Get it removed. I mean, how many guys, Dave, have you heard gone and had gyno surgery and literally the gyno came back 5 months later?
I know. Well, that's why I tell people, I said, it's like when I had my shoulders replaced, I went to the guy who's done 10,000 of them. The guy who invented the reverse shoulder. That's who did my reverse shoulder. If you're going to get your gyno out, which is the most glaring, when you look at someone's chest, that's what you see. Don't go to someone who you don't know because you're saving $10. You go to the best. That's why I send everyone. Dr. Blau's probably done half the bodybuilding community because I've sent everyone to him because it's that important cosmetically. Yes.
Yes. And the thing is, and I had to learn all this. And again, this is all in chapter 11 of the TRT Bible. And by the way, anyone who watches your show, they want the book, I send the PDF to you for free. Really? All you have to do, absolutely, dude. I give back, bro.
How do you get that book from you?
Just have them email me, contact@trtrevolution.com, and one of my team will send them the book right away.
Wow, you're gonna get a lot of emails, so I hope you.
I can't wait, dude. That's the whole point. We got to educate, right? We want to educate. But here's the thing. Back to what you just said, and I know your doc knows this. This is where these guys fuck up. The gland goes here, bro. You know that, right? That's why you got to have, when your shit's taken out, you got to have a drain. Right. Because they have to remove all the glandular growth and granular tissue in your ducting. And if you're doing both sides, it's going to be the same, right? So if you do this right, you're going to be down maybe 4 to 6 days, from your job, especially if your job is like a work job. If you're like you and me, You're going to be back podcasting, talking, interviewing, writing, or whatever with fucking 48 hours. Dude.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not guys, a big deal.
They fuck it up, dude. You know, you just said it. Guys go to these dumbass quack surgeons, pay $2,500, get cut on, they remove the shit, it's back in 4 months.
Yeah, or the scars are horrendous too. So you got to go to a board certified plastic surgeon. That's the bottom line. You know, Jay, we could probably talk all day. I love these topics. I definitely want to get you back because I got a lot more questions to ask you. But I love what you're doing. I love, you know, I haven't read the books yet, but I just hear what you're talking about. You're cutting edge. And I think sometimes you have to change the mindset of what the community is thinking in order to move into the next realm of what we're looking for. And I agree with you. I think that visceral fat deposition, I think body inflammation is a huge topic that a lot of people are not addressing. And, you know, I don't think anyone's ever thought of it in terms of these aromatase inhibitors causing health problems. And I think you're opening up the channels of thought, and I think that this is a good thing because I don't want to see all these young guys dropping dead in 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, me neither. I wish we could do autopsies on a lot of the pros that have died, you know, within the last 5 years, because that's what Ben and I were talking about, and we could look at those vascular networks. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure if you did, you would see the micro blisters. But hey, man, it's been an honor for me to be here and talking to you about this. I will talk to you anytime you want to bring me on. And again, I'm with you, man. We got to educate. That's why I always make my shit free to the community, because it's about saving lives. It's not about making money, brother.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Remember, you give us the email address one more time.
Yeah, it's contact@trtrevolution.com. And also, if they want my fasting book, which is next level, I'll send that to you for free too, the PDF. Wow.
Just ask for it, guys. You can't get better than that. Free. We love free. My view is, Jay, love free stuff. And I love free stuff too. So I'm going to send an email as well to you. And thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, brother. I appreciate it. It's been an honor.
And that's going to take us to another edition of Guru Talk. I'm Dave Palumbo. For Jay Campbell, we'll see you next time.